Good morning. I'm Peter Agelasto. It's August. It's the 15th anniversary of the Rockfish Valley Foundation, which was founded in 2005 in August. We are here at Spruce Creek Park in front of what is known as our Geology kiosk. In this week of celebration of anniversary, we will be doing different things. The first one that I am involved in today is geology. And it really goes back to the heart and soul of what brought my family to Nelson County in 1977. We were interested in what we saw outdoors. Being at Elk Hill, we saw the Blue Ridge and we saw the Rockfish River. Very quickly, we met people like Keith Fry, who wrote a book on roadside geology in Virginia that had a little tiny piece about our valley. Almost immediately after that, we established one of our most wonderful friendships with Chip Morgan and his wife Donnie. They introduced us to David Spear, who worked with mines and minerals, and before you knew it, David was the geologist of Virginia. He was the state's geologist. David inspired us. Keith Fry inspired us. The Wintergreen Nature Foundation inspired us. Before we knew it, the Rockfish Valley Foundation was a reality, and Bama Works Foundation provided the money for us to really do some study and presentation of geology in the valley. And that came from David Spear, Nick Evans, who worked with him, and also with JMU, with two professors, one being Lynn Fichter, the other being Eric Powell. And we got storyboards and videos and a geology trail. And then we got our Natural History Center. And before you knew it, we had a great exhibit. And my wife, Betsy, has done the last exhibit and had it graded by none other than Chuck Bailey, who happens to be a professor at William & Mary in geology. He and his students created the map that's behind me, which you're going to learn more about. And now the Rockfish Valley Foundation, with a number of grants, is probably in a position over time, absent the COVID pandemic, presenting the most interesting stories of geology in the Piedmont, in Nelson, in the Rockfish Valley. And we're so excited to have the students in field classes from Chuck Bailey, but more than anything, we are excited to have Chuck Bailey.
Hello, I'm Chuck Bailey. I'm a professor of geology at William & Mary, and over the past 2 years I've had the great pleasure of working with the Rockfish Valley Foundation to better understand the natural history here in the Rockfish Valley. I've got a variety of students who've been working on both individual and class research projects up here, and in the future we hope to bring a lot of life to the geology and landscape here in this part of the Piedmont and the Blue Ridge. What is pinned up here on the kiosk is a geologic map of the Rockfish Valley and Wintergreen area. And what makes a geologic map different than most maps is that a geologic map actually is colorful, and the colors indicate what bedrock occurs where. So for instance, along the Blue Ridge Parkway, you can see this green pattern here. These are rocks of the Catoctin Formation. They formed as fiery lava flows some 570 million years ago. And they are quite different than the rocks that we see down here in the Rockfish Valley. Here in the Rockfish Valley, you may notice this sort of strip of relatively gray looking colors here. And this is a major fault zone where ancient granites of the Blue Ridge were sheared and squished as we actually created the structure or the internal architecture here in the Blue Ridge.
Here's a close-up of the geologic map. And as you can see, there are many different colors on the map. Each represents a different type of rock. The Rockfish Valley, it turns out, is actually underlain by a major fault zone, which is shown here in the bluish gray color. These rocks are somewhat weaker and more easily erodible than the rocks on either side. so much of the landscape is directly related to the underlying bedrock. From the geologic map patterns, we can make some inferences about the three-dimensional nature of the rock bodies here in the Rockfish Valley and the Blue Ridge. So this is a cross-section illustrating sort of the third dimension. You can see the Rockfish Valley fault zone, which is a wide zone that formed hundreds of millions of years ago. The older rocks that are Precambrian granites are in the stippled pattern, and then in places like Devil's Knob, we have the greenstones of the Catoctin Formation, which sit above the older rocks that make up the basement part of the Blue Ridge.
Here we are in the rock garden at Spruce Creek Park, and I brought a few samples from the Rockfish Valley here to give a sense of the kind of geology we see in this part of Virginia. The rock in my hand here is a very coarse-grained rock. Hopefully you can see the large white grains as well as the smoky blue-colored grains. These are different minerals. The white is a mineral known as feldspar, and the blue is actually quartz. And one of the things that's very distinctive about the geology here in the Blue Ridge is that oftentimes the quartz grains are blue. Quartz can come in many colors, gray, white, red, but here in the Blue Ridge Mountains we have a variety of blue quartz that is indeed distinctive. So this coarse-grained assemblage of feldspar and blue quartz composes a rock we know as a granite. And granite's one of the more common igneous rocks that we find in the continental crust. And here in the Blue Ridge, these granitic rocks formed as magma, slowly crystallized, turning to stone. And this granite would have formed many, many, many miles below the Earth's surface. The other thing that's distinctive about granites in the Blue Ridge is that they're quite old. In fact, these are some of the oldest rocks in eastern North America and the Appalachians.
In these images, you get a sense of what it's like to do geology on the ground. Here are photos of William & Mary students, part of my geologic field methods class, examining the bedrock right here in Nelson County. They're examining rock exposures along the side of a road, and later, in the second image here, you can see them digesting what they've observed, putting these things together onto a map, and that is, in essence, how we go about creating these geologic maps, with one detailed observation after another over the whole array of the terrain.
The landscape in Nelson County is truly remarkable, and this remarkable landscape owes its character to the underlying geology. Here in the distance you can see three ridges. The summit on Three Ridges, which the Appalachian Trail crosses, is nearly 4,000 feet above sea level, and I am standing on the floodplain of the Rockfish River at an elevation of about 700 feet above sea level. There is a great deal of topographic relief between the top of the Blue Ridge and the floor of the Rockfish Valley. One of the great questions is, how did this landscape form? How did it develop? It's underlain by many, many rocks of different flavors that are actually quite old. But the landscape here in the Blue Ridge, Nelson County, and the Rockfish Valley is much younger than that, and is actually forming sort of all around us all the time.
This colorful shaded relief digital elevation map of the Rockfish Valley and surrounding region is one of the things that we use to get a better sense of what the landscape is. You'll notice it's color-coded so that the high peaks like Devil's Knob and Three Ridges are shaded in light gray here, whereas the Rockfish Valley and the Rockfish River are in these shades of light green. And from these maps we can see a lot of topographic detail, the very subtle features that are developed on this landscape of both ridges and valleys, ravines, and rivers.
We're here along the Rockfish River. You can hear the water sort of gurgling in the background. And the Rockfish River drainage accumulates water from the crest of the Blue Ridge at Rockfish Gap, Humpback Mountain, Devil's Knob, Three Ridges. It coalesces and forms east-southeast across Nelson County. Eventually, these waters will merge into the James River at Howardsville. And the flow of running water and the transport of sediment and chemical elements is really another part of the geologic story that we're trying to tell and understand here in Nelson County.
This map illustrates the Rockfish River watershed. The heavy, dark line outlines the drainage basin of this river, which starts in the Blue Ridge Mountains, places like Three Ridges, all the way to Rockfish Gap near Afton. These waters flow south and east, merging together and flowing across the Nelson County landscape, ultimately reaching the James River at Howardsville.
The floodplain of the Rockfish River is interesting. It's underlain by gravel and sand that's been actually transported, eroded from the Blue Ridge, the heights of the Blue Ridge, down here into the valley, and left behind over years as the Rockfish River migrates back and forth. One of the projects we've been working on at William & Mary is trying to understand the age and origin of these deposits right here on the Rockfish floodplain.
In this video clip, William & Mary students are dragging a ground-penetrating radar unit across the floodplain of the Rockfish River. This machine sends out an array of electromagnetic pulses which bounce back and allow us to sort of reconstruct the three-dimensional nature of the floodplain. You can see here the students that are actually working the machine, gauging kind of its effectiveness. And in the final scene here, the red and blues illustrate the nature of the horizontal layers of gravel and sand beneath the Rockfish River floodplain.
Welcome back. Once again, we're here along the Rockfish River, and it's a placid day in August with the flow coming off the mountains rolling by here. And behind me is the Virginia Route 151 bridge. And on the night of August 19th into the 20th of August, 1969, 51 years ago, after the remnants of Hurricane Camille dumped 20, 25, 30 inches of rain in parts of the Blue Ridge, the waters of the Rockfish were up. They were roiling, they were muddy, they were full of trees, rock debris. They covered the road here, and during that fateful night, there were hundreds of people that were ultimately killed due to flood damage and debris flows here in Nelson County. The legacy of Hurricane Camille is one that's not going to be forgotten in Nelson County, and it's an important part of the geologic story. How the landscape is denuded and how it oftentimes happens in pulses, sort of dramatic and catastrophic pulses.
Thanks for joining me with this video. I hope you've learned some things, learned a few things about the geology, the landscape, and the rivers here in the Rockfish Valley, the Blue Ridge, and the Piedmont. Indeed, this is a fabulous terrain, and going forward with our work with the Rockfish Valley Foundation, we continue to plan to involve William & Mary students both in sort of research as well as educational products that hopefully the foundation will be able to use for years to come. Thanks, and take good care.